Welcome. Let pop culture be your guide using fandom and strategic organizing. Brought to you by
Portia Patterson-Hurst from Opportunity Agenda. I have so many affiliations. We'll go over that in a second. So happy to be
you're.
here.
You're a little quiet for me, but that might just be me.
I can try to adjust my audio.
And I'm going to encourage people live tweet the conference. This is our hashtag in the corner, ORG20, like for organizing 2.0, because you can't put a period in a hashtag. So I'll introduce myself. Hello, I am Ilana Levin. My Twitter, which I'm on too much, is Ilana_Brooklyn. And in addition to being co-founder of Organizing 2.0, when I'm not running this conference, and I'm not leading digital strategy trainings, I am also a pop culture critic, specifically talking a lot about comics and superhero genre media. But my first true love is comics. Over there, I'm Shatterstar from X-Men. And I have a brand new podcast they started called Deep Space Dive, where we take a look at the Deep Space Nine Star Trek show with a range of analysts, like from labor union organizers to policy wonks, looking at the show's subtexts. And I love that we get to talk about the intersection of these topics at this today as part of my work. New Media Mentors, we teach digital strategy to nonprofit organizations. And in addition to teaching people stuff like how to tweet effectively and build effective digital campaigns, we also lead trainings like this on involving pop culture and integrating it into your organizing in meaningful ways. And joining me.
Again, Portia Patterson-Hurst. Do you hear me better now? Great. She, her, from Opportunity Agenda. I'm a research manager there, which means that I help us kind of work with people in the field to find cool information. I have no direct cosplays. I do have general fandoms. So before, I used to be really into Harry Potter. And so my best cosplay was as a student of Ravenclaw House, which is the house I am part of. And that is me at one of the panels at a Harry Potter con. And then also I love Pokemon, and my husband and I love Pokemon. And so that was part of our yes, Ravenclaw's Hannah. We did our engagement photos as Pokemon trainers at some point in Central Park. So it was really fun.
I love it.
Yeah, we also did some Ravenclaw stuff. It was fun. We'll say Opportunity Agenda is a social justice communications lab based in New York City. We work with partners in the field to identify messaging and narrative guidance that leads to changing hearts and minds around progressive issues. Some of those issues include immigration, racial justice, economic opportunity, and we kind of try to have a overarching branch on that. Be intersectional. We work to advance the impact of social justice leaders in the community in general. And we do that by shaping compelling narratives and messages, building communication capacity of leaders through training and resources, and engaging with artists, creatives, and culture makers as storytellers to shift public discourse. And that comes through our tangible resources like reports and toolkits, as well as trainings, webinars, and our fellows programs.
So I want to get a sense of who's in the room. I guess hard to say raise your hand, so put it in the chat.
There's a raise hand function, right?
Yeah, but I can't see them if they're not on camera, and I don't want everybody to go on camera because then we get people in their underwear, which is awkward. So we're going to do, if you work for a school or educational institution, would love to hear about it. Hello to my union brother from 32BJ in Florida. If you're here because you volunteer for an organization as opposed to our staffer, that's also of interest. If you work for a labor center, worker center, more SCIU, I love my purple friends. Or if you work for a nonprofit organization that does campaign work, let's sort of hear who's in this space, because it can impact what we do, especially the question between staff and volunteers and stuff like that. CUPE, union, gosh, we have a lot of union people. That's my own background, is doing digital for labor unions. So I want to sort of talk at first about a fan activism as a concept. This is the definition that was brought to me through the work of the folks in the Harry Potter Alliance, which I know we'll be talking about some in a bit. But fan activism is engaging in activism through storytelling and fandom by drawing parallels between popular media and real world social issues. One of the tweet that really felt like summed up some of this power for me was from Rusty Polished, who wrote, "Teen girls love the stuff they love harder than anyone in the world, and they are powerful." But teen girls are not the only people who are in fandoms. So obviously, people think a lot about Star Trek. In fact, the fact that there is a second, that the TNG, Star Trek The Next Generation, even exists was the result of fans like rallying and going to the network and demanding a new Star Trek show. The fandom are also sports teams, right? It's not my fandom and it's a thing, but they exist. A fandom, and also can be things like Parks and Recreation, which is sort of a more broad-based broadcast TV show. But when you think about the fact that the whole concept of Galentine's Day was basically invented by their show, and it became a thing, and now people who don't even watch Parks and Rec celebrate Galentine's Day, you know, the fandom's impact goes beyond just the people who engage with that particular fandom.
And on my part, I wanted to talk about how we take fandom activation, and use it to cultivate audiences. A lot of Opportunity Agenda's work is around the idea of audience and advocating to like who you know is in your audience. And so we're going to touch on that for a sec and then pull in our fandom perspectives. So here, just want to plug some Opportunity Agenda work that is semi-related on the pop cultural note. If you were a viewer of Jimmy Kimmel in 2017, you may have noticed that he led a charge against the Graham-Cassidy bill that would repeal the Affordable Care Act, specifically because he had a child who was born with a congenital heart defect, and he wanted to make sure that any legislation that was going forward would be able to cover any needs that any child that was born with similar issues may cover. When analysis went through, they found out that it would not. So that's when Jimmy Kimmel appealed to his audience to get them to call the representatives and vote against the Graham-Cassidy bill, which worked. And the bill was proposed and canceled within the same year, 2017. So the Opportunity Agenda in 2019, we did a report on the role of pop cultural influencers, which are, you know, they have their own fan bases and they can drive a lot of the work. So if you want to learn more about who we covered there, because we covered the Me Too movement, as well as Colin Kaepernick and his protest, you can just get our slides after the end of this presentation or the end of the conference. And the link here, the Case for Pop Culture Influence, it's a direct link to our report. So some of the core principles that Opportunity Agenda uses, and which I'll go through as we're going through the fandom to give examples, is to kind of get to the audience and make sure that we are with them and they are with us as we go through this work, is use the core principles that are here, which are lead with shared values, making sure that what you're messaging and what you're talking about is on the same continuum as where the fans are cultivating their values and their experiences. Promote solutions. You'll see examples, we'll have examples here about having like drawing attention to the issue, but not necessarily providing solutions. But we also show how leading with a solution leads to a valuable fan service and promotion of an issue. We also want to make sure that we evoke familiar themes and metaphors. You'll see that through our examples as well. And tell a systemic story. Make it clear how the issues that people are noticing are tied to grander, bigger infrastructural issues that we can work on together. So values and fandom. We're basically here asking fans to fight for the values portrayed in a story. So something that I'm going to mention is that one of my major fandoms used to be Harry Potter. And as part of that, I was a volunteer with Harry Potter Alliance and currently serve on their board as a board member. So a lot of the examples I'm going to give here are going to be from that perspective because I engage a lot of my fan activism through the Harry Potter Alliance.
So a couple examples from looking at this driven by values are, one of my favorite efforts is from Color of Change and a number of other partners, was called Wakanda the Vote. They were registering folks to vote and who were waiting in line to see Black Panther. And one of the reasons this was brilliant is because like fans were already engaging in Black Panther movie as a cultural movement that wasn't just about, I'm going to go see a movie. People were waiting in line, bringing their whole families, going in costume, and as well as going in African clothes that they had. And and since people were standing in a line, what a great opportunity to get people registered to vote. They're in a line. And I love that they were using very consistently the hashtag Wakanda the Vote, along with the hashtag Black Panther. Black Panther was literally trending all over the world, and they would be able to be in that conversation while also using Wakanda the Vote, which was about bringing an Afrofuturist frame to thinking about voting and the future of voting. So I love that example there. One of the things about Black Panther Challenge, I don't even know if I was going to mention this, but I guess I will, was that it ended up structuring itself as a lot of people raising money to send low-income Black youth to see movies. But like Disney has money, Disney should be doing that. And like in my dream reality, rather than private citizens donating to Disney, it should have been a pressure campaign to get Disney to give tickets to people who, to Black youth who can't afford to go, to be able to go to the movie and have this collective experience. But anyway, but that's an example that came straight out of organic organizing by fans rather than stuff that was coming from the organizing and activist community itself. So you can see that there's a difference in how we process causality and the analysis that we bring of what has to happen for things to change. But they're both awesome. Anybody organizing around pop culture to help people is like my bag, even if it's not necessarily the strategy I would have promoted myself.
And I mentioned the Harry Potter Alliance to also mention that they did have a toolkit around Black Panther
Yes.
the time it came out to address racial equity, and it's a really cool toolkit. So if you want to look over it, and they worked with this campaign with pushing out their voter guide and like uplifting a lot of the work that was going on around it.
Yeah, I think we have more information when we get to the fan activist con slides.
Yeah.
So great.
So yeah, and then so again, according to the core principles, next step is provide solutions in thematic storytelling. So what we're doing is using immersive storytelling to draw direct parallels from the events of the story. So whatever the fandom you're approaching, and using that in real world organizing. One of my favorite examples, again from the Harry Potter Alliance, was this campaign called Without Hermione. What they ask is for people to imagine a world without Hermione. If you're familiar with the story of Harry Potter, Hermione Granger is like the Harry and Ron would not have made it throughout the series without her influence. Like there's just no way. Hermione's like the voice of reason. She was the one who who made sure that things were taken care of. When Hagrid suffered from the death of, or the possible death of like Buckbeak, the only person giving him legal advice was Hermione Granger, a freaking 13-year-old. So it was just, there's a lot of things that would have gone awfully. And she also was one of the time turner third book. There's so many things. Like we just, through analysis, figured out, very strict, thorough analysis, figured out that Hermione was central to the book. And without her, Harry and Ron both would have died in book one. And part of the thing when thinking about without Hermione is that she is very intelligent and had that access to education. What happens is that in the world, a lot of women and young girls are not allowed to receive education, and gender equity is pretty bad, and especially like in places where that are like inequitably like given funding. So we worked with She's the First, a organization that gives scholarships to young women so that they can go to school and they can complete their education. And through this campaign in 2017, the Harry Potter Alliance raised enough money to cover 4 years of high school tuition for at least 25 She's the First scholars, who were the first girls in their family to receive a high school diploma. Tell us a story. Oh.
Sorry, no, go ahead. I think this is you.
Oh, yeah. tell a systemic story. So recognize occurrences of injustice within a fan property and use them to talk about the systemic issues in the real world. This is going to be more tangible and real world focused. Not that gender inequality isn't. I was thinking. So here was also a Harry Potter campaign called Stop the Snatchers. What they did was draw a real world parallel between, if you did not read the books, also you can see this in the movies. I think it's the final movie. No, it also was in the 6th and 7th movies. You notice that, or 7th and 8th movies, that there are snatchers who are Voldemort's minions, they're not necessarily part of the Death Eaters, the big death murder squad who are like older. They are the ones who are trying to obtain money by taking up of others' misfortunes, which is like they are not full-blooded wizard, basically discrimination. They're going to capture these people who are not full-blood wizards, and they're going to, or suspected not, and they're going to take them to the Death Eaters and hopefully torture, jail them, whatever. So there's a real world parallel here with giving like people being forced to be in camps and detained on the border. And the HPA worked with racists and Never Again Action to train hundreds of fans to stop the snatchers and fight ICE in their communities and try to make the community safer for people who were previously detained or for immigrants in general.
So one of the opportunities I saw that kind of inspired some of the work that we ended up doing for Black Panther was when the Wonder Woman movie was released. I was really hoping that some organization doing like actual women's like feminist organization work or anti-war work would be like, oh my God, there's a movie coming out about Wonder Woman. Like, how can we leverage this to get people to focus on the issues and policies we need to have changed? And that didn't happen. What I saw instead was fans were organically doing things like fundraising for charities. I want to see them fundraising for abortion funds. I don't want to see them, I mean, raise money for charities is fine, but like, I want to see some more radical things and more systemic approaches to fighting injustice coming from this. And it was just broke my heart that there weren't more organizations jumping on this opportunity. So, you know, I came together with some people from fandom and some critics to talk about the Wonder Woman movie through a political lens. And we had a whole live tweet chat. You know, we talked about the ways in which the movie was problematic. We talked about the ways in which there were, you know, issues with Gal Gadot casting. And we talked about why people do appreciate and what resonates with us in the movie as well. Because if you're going to just show up in a fandom and be negative, then that's not going to be well received. But as fans, we engage with the media that we love in a way that is critical as well as appreciative. So we had this whole tweet chat. We had a ton of bite on it. And I said, you know what, let me see if I can get some support to do something called Black Panther Fan Activist Con, which is actually how Portia and I first connected. Worked with the Center for Story-Based Strategy, Intelligent Mischief, Harry Potter Alliance, and Black Girls Create to put together an online event. This is online event before COVID was even like making us all be online, to bring together fans and organizations that were working on racial justice and environmental justice to know each other and to create something together. Because popularity of a lot of everything from like Harry Potter to, I mean, all these fandoms, even if the creator of such products sometimes have absolutely retrograde and vile politics, the stories that people are telling are about individuals fighting for change as a collective. And that is something which resonates with a lot of progressive audiences. And so progressive folks are out there talking about stories of progressive values, and they sometimes aren't connected with the progressive organizations that they can be active in. So we were thinking like, okay, if someone's going to see Black Panther and they might not think about what are the grassroots groups in their own community who they could be supporting and engaging with. So we were like, let's be a matchmaker, let's make this happen. So what did we do? We had workshops, including orientation to the movie's themes, which is something that you guys worked on. We had a gift making workshop to help make fandom based gifts like the one you see up top. We hosted a Twitter town hall to bring together Black Panther fans and people doing organizing work from smaller Black and Brown community organizations, including, you guys probably know now of Black Voters Matter, which has become like a really huge organization, and they actually hosted their first Twitter town hall through this event. And the folks from the Harry Potter Alliance really led the way in making a fan activist toolkit, which is like literally a strategy that they invented, if you want to talk about what that looks like.
Oh yeah, I thought yes. So Harry Potter Alliance has multiple toolkits on their website. Um, they skew everywhere from Avatar: The Last Airbender for environmental rights to, as Alana's talking about, the Black Panther toolkit, which is talking about racial equity. We had all these different people from this Fan Activist Con come in and put in a couple of like guiding principles about what could be addressed from what the movie Black Panther gave us, from like characters to the actual like themes that are within the story, including like museums and the role that they have with cultural theft, basically. And it's a really great toolkit. And I'll get I can't share the secret yet, but I'll give a hint later about some things that come from the Fan Activist toolkits.
Another thing I want to point to is that we literally hired an illustrator to work with our attendees to make illustrations, to sort of brought the message from the movie to life. And you should pay artists to do this work. Artists are amazing at this, and we hired an artist from the comics fan community. I see a lot of organizations sometimes having art that they make around pop culture, but it doesn't actually match the aesthetics of the campaign at all. Like if you're having like generic activism looking art and you're trying to do it in a superhero milieu, that doesn't look right. Like work with artists from the fan communities that you're trying to engage with. They're like part of that. They can help you speak that language better. So in the end result, we had a huge event. A lot of people participated. People also made 107 GIFs in 3.5 hours. And if you're ever looking for a Black Panther related activism GIF, you'll find these GIFs under Black Panther, but there's a lot of GIFs under Black Panther. So the fastest way to find these GIFs is under Fan Activist Con. And I feel like I have to go a little bit faster because there's so much material, but we will do that.
Yes, I will speed up my words.
No, we shouldn't talk too fast. I'm just trying to go over my stuff more quickly.
Fandom, as Alana was saying earlier, it's not always, and honestly not great that to lead with having organizers lead the charge. Usually there's a lot of great work that comes from having working with where the fans are, and if they're already leading the charge on issues, we should work with where they are and move forward with that. So on that note,
so one of the examples a lot of the examples that I find of fans doing fan activism that is outside of anything to do with the nonprofit industrial complex is around representation in media. I think it's because it's very clear that people want to see themselves reflected in the stories that they love. There was a huge viral campaign on social media called #GiveElsa_a_girlfriend, where people pointed out that Elsa's story in Frozen was literally a coming out story. And we don't have any like canonically LGBTQ characters in the Disney Mishigas. And so fans started just like making memes to talk about it. It trended all over the place and it leveraged some pressure onto Disney. You know, they're still terrible and do terrible things, but they're like, now they like to pretend that they're going to do something more diverse. If you don't have that campaign in the first place, though, you're not going to get to that end point. And certainly since then, we have seen more queer representation in cartoons as well. You saw it in Voltron, and you actually have, you know, queer creators making queer cartoons, you know, on Cartoon Network. And I think campaigns like this from the fans demonstrating that there is a need for it helps the creators who want to make diverse art have the backing that they need to be able to show corporate, like there's a demand for this, people want to see this, etc. The Captain America, like, you know, then had its own spinoff with Captain America, a boyfriend, where people were talking about, you know, gay subtext and the Captain America story. And Marvel is like sort of moved on some of this in the movies. And this is all stuff that came out independently, right? And eventually some of the organizations that LGBTQ groups started sort of echoing and growing on it. And I thought it was great because they were sharing stuff that was made by the fans themselves rather than kind of bigfooting their way in and making it like that was their own. We have a question about copyright. I have never had anybody try to fight about us using pop culture in campaigns in these ways because it's like gives them attention. A lot of the memes and GIFs that we use are already on the sharing platforms because the creators want people to use it because it like spreads their message. In addition, like there's a lot of legal protection around like satire and nonprofit use, etc. I don't know, Portia, if you have experience you want to reflect on, but I've just never seen anybody actually get in trouble for this unless you're literally pretending to be the company.
The Harry Potter Alliance has had multiple, not like run-ins, but like strongly worded emails from WB lawyers about what like using like direct things, right? So like if you used like Hogwarts houses, that was something that we could, like the Harry Potter Alliance could not do at a certain point, so they had to go change over to like green, red, blue. So there's ways to get around it. Just have to be smart about it. And then there are like quotes that the Harry Potter Alliance sells shirts that have different quotes from the series, not like directly from the series, well, yeah, from the books. One is a Hermione quote, but it's not so like eponymous that you would be like, oh, that's directly from Hermione Granger. So there are ways to get around it, but there are also like you have to be very clear about like when you're not going to use Hogwarts, you're not going to use the house names, you're not going to, like, there's different ways to get around that.
And just to be clear though, nobody is getting in trouble for making a Superstore meme to talk about why we should unionize.
Yeah, no, it's the selling of products, right? So it's like literally if you're trying to get some kind of profit off of their work or their properties that they own.
Another interesting fan sort of campaign that combined fans and a fandom organization was Iron Fist when that show came out. I love that everyone's hopefully forgotten about it because it was absolute trash on the Netflix channel. A lot of Asian American comics writers like Marjorie Liu pointed out that the entire character himself was an Orientalist white man yellow fever narrative, and that they should really cast an AAPI actor, because then the story would completely change to be about his relationship to his Asian heritage versus being like a white guy showing up in fictional Asian country and suddenly being the best at everything. And the fandom started making fan art of what it could look like and talking about it. There was actually a petition that got put together working with 18 Million Rising, which is an AAPI community like group that's very digital and very pop culture savvy. And I really recommend people follow them online, 18 Million Rising. They did a petition with them. And what was amazing was while they still went ahead and cast a mediocre white guy as Iron Fist, we destroyed the media cycle. Everything in the press was talking about how fans were upset that they didn't cast an Asian American actor in the role. To the point where even Marvel started mostly promoting the Asian American co-star in their marketing materials. So even if you don't have a direct win in one area, it often will impact what happens next. So let's talk about, we've been talking about JKR and like problematic material and problematic creators, and I want us to definitely talk about how we engage with that. So one of the points I look at is that we should be, the fans aren't stupid. Fans are fans because they engage with the text critically, and any kind of critique that you might have about the way a movie, book, or film or comic is problematic, I assure you, actual fans are talking about that already. So rather than having nonprofit organizations show up and be like, hey, everybody, this thing is racist, go and look for the fans who are talking about it and elevate their analysis and their critique. Because I assure you, if you show up at a party saying your thing is problematic, nobody is going to join you at the party. But shit is problematic, and we need to talk about the fucked up stuff that happens. And we should be going through the fans to talk about it. And additionally, like, we should talk about the ways things could be made better rather than talking about the way it should like be ending. Now, Harry Potter Alliance found itself in a very specific situation with respect to that. Let's talk about, Portia, do you want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, so I just want to especially note that the Harry Potter Alliance is like when you look at the actual like demographics for who their volunteer network is, who is the primary base of the Harry Potter Alliance. There's like 4 actual like paid staff members, and then the rest is all like completely virtual volunteer base, right? Of that volunteer base, 80-something% of them are identify as women. The next highest percent are trans or queer, trans literally, and then male is like 2%. So it's very small. The figures for this, like, I don't know the direct figures for this year, but they stay in that scope. So when J.K. Rowling did some very anti-trans tweets and also just like kept speaking up, wrote an essay, just was very violently anti-trans, the Harry Potter Alliance not only was coming from a place of like not agreeing and not wanting to put that harm back out in the community, but they also want, like, this is their base, and that was something that had to go like away like that. But first of all, the Harry Potter Alliance was never behind J.K. Rowling. It was about the messaging and that was spread through the Harry Potter series. So that was something that they didn't really have to distinguish because that was never part of their model. But they did want to move away from the harm that they knew that the like just like hearing about the fandom and like having perpetuated about the fandom was doing to people when they were hearing about it. So they have decided to change the name of the organization. And in a couple of weeks, maybe like about a month or so, they will be announcing what the new name for the organization will be. So they're directly taking themselves away from any direct association with Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, but they will still try to use the fandom where they can, because I know there's a lot of the fan community who are upset with the like connotations of like this big, great social justice world of Harry Potter kind of going away and people just distancing themselves. So it's just like a fine line, but the Harry Potter Alliance, which will be a new name soon, has decided to move forward. Also going to note, my other plug is Black Girls Create. I am the director of strategic development partnership there, and they also have had to work hard with critical fandom and critical engagement around J.K. Rowling, and they recently ended their podcast on Harry Potter. So it's had resounding effects across multiple communities who've been into Harry Potter fandom.
And I look at like, you know, the way the fan response was to, I'm so happy I no longer remember her name, but the horrible transphobic actress in Mandalorian. Like, we got her fired.
Yeah.
And people got it fired because people were like, I love this show, she's fucked up. Whereas when you show up and you're like, I hate this and this needs to be like, if you're able to approach something as a fan offering a critique, that will translate better to the target than just being, thank you, Cara Dune, bye. You know, rather than just being like, we hate everything. So how are we on time right now? I have so many slides. Oh, okay, we can do this. I do encourage people who are sort of interested in dipping a toe in to some of these fan activism stuff, just to look and think about what are you a fan of? How does it connect to the stories and social movements that you care about? And think about doing a tweet chat where you and some other fans can come together and sort of talk about it through a political lens, a social justice lens, and talk about what you love. This is like a fun and low stakes way to sort of have your organization, you know, dip the toe into doing this. I encourage people, I mean, let me start with, now I'll start with here this time. So a lot of the time, people in this room are wearing lots of different hats in their organizations. And the person who was most involved in a fandom in your organization might not necessarily be someone in the communications department or digital. It might be someone in finance. It might be someone in field. It could be a researcher. Like, figure out who in your organization is active in a fandom, like ask them, and then think about how you can use how they might use their relationships and community to connect with those stories. I also like to literally ask organizations members, what do they watch? What shows are they engaging in? And reflect that in what fandoms you guys engage with as an organization, and have the members really leading the way. Because like, even at the squarest organization, I assure you, you have members who watch TV, who watch movies, who like podcasts. Like, your members are engaging in culture. So find out what that is and bring them in to lead those conversations. Like, I'm not going to be the right person to put together a campaign around like using something that happens in a telenovela, but there's members of the group who totally could do that, right? You need to make sure that you sound like a human and not like an institution. If you are not allowed to sound like a human in your engagement on social media, you will, one, be bad at social media, period, and two, will not be successful at doing fan organizing. And maybe if your organization doesn't let your org account do those things, you and your voice can do that. Oh my God, Jonas, I love this example. This is right. The IATSE members, like a lot of them love D&D, and they did one tweet that referenced it in a really intelligent way, and it really went viral. They got 4K retweets. We also need to be honest about our agenda. Like, I don't want to show up in a fandom conversation in which I'm doing work with an organization and not be clear that like that's what I'm doing. So saying like, oh, hey, I'm with XYZ might not be the first thing I say, but it's like maybe the second or third. And people are often enthusiastic to hear that a nonprofit organization is like engaged in these conversations and cares about it. But you want to do that authentically and come off authentic when you do it. So like this would be an example of how I talk about something. I'd be like, you know, if we're going to do a live tweet of sorry to bother you, which I'm still waiting for a labor union. Actually, no, I think, I take it back. I think there was a union who did do a group view of sorry to bother you and did a tweet of it a little while ago. But this is the kind of thing I'd love to see more of. You know, like use the memes, use the GIFs that are already in your Giphy keyboard and say that you're who you're with and like be authentic in why you're there, but also why you care. How are you finding fans? Where are they? Obviously, you want to start by asking your members like where they are at, but there's a lot of other places that we find fans for organizing. Twitter, obviously, you see people like live tweeting shows, and shows that have a lot of active live tweeting are a good place to start. Some kinds of shows just don't have as active a live tweet community around them. And social media platforms can be a way that your members are already engaging with other fans. So like your members might be in these spaces and they can be thinking about how are they bringing their activism in other places to the fan spaces they're already in on Instagram and in podcasts and Tumblr.
Yeah, and I'll just note, the opportunity has taken advantage of like, well, one, our former president was a big nerd, which is great. So he really loved superheroes, and we have our own superhero, Helvetica Bold, who fights in the name of social justice, and he brought her to different conventions, not just fan conventions. Like, yes, he did. We did have a booth at New York Comic Con one year. I remember hearing about. This is before my time. And then there was also Helvetica Bold activation at Netroots. So there are a lot of opportunities. I mean, you don't have to make your own organizational superhero unless you want to, but there are a lot of opportunities to engage with people at conventions, meeting them on an organizational level.
I mean, back when people start being in the same place at the same time again, I mean, I love to see voter registration efforts at fan conventions, theme parks and theme shops.
Yeah, I mean, I keep having here. Okay, Harry Potter Alliance also has Camp GLA this past year, which was about voting rights, and their whole it was a digital con. They worked with a couple of different democracy orgs, and they did a lot of activations around voter registration and signing people up to do calls and other reach outs.
Oh, so somebody was mentioning how there were really great Avatar: The Last Airbender tweets that came up from advocacy orgs when it came onto Netflix. And I think that's a great example of how even if a show is old, it has the opportunity to come back and have another moment. And you know, that's a show that has a lot of themes for different groups. You can use it to talk about war. You can use it to talk about climate change. You can use it to talk about colonialism, which is a big theme of the series, and like have a rich conversation with people about that. Meanwhile, I've had a lot of people ask me, why is it that you think that there hasn't been any meaningful fan organizing happening in the Game of Thrones fandom? This is before season 8 when everything went to hell and we stopped liking the show anyway. This is like from before that. And my take was that it's because the world of A Song of Ice and Fire is so depressing and the outlook is so grim. And I'm at this as someone who, you know, used to be like a big fan, that it doesn't really leave space for you to use it as a way to talk about the fight against climate change. Because yes, the book is about how war is bad and how climate change is coming, but it's not like, and it's just so fucking bleak. I mean, and so maybe if the final book ever comes out, there will be a way to use it in that moment. But think about the tone of what you're engaging with, because the tone does matter. Whereas Avatar, which has those themes, has a hopeful conclusion. So that helps you tell a story with more hope. And another thing is I find sometimes organizations feel like they have to go through the official routes to do fan organizing by going to the publishers and going to the, going to the corporations, and they are oftentimes the last people who are going to approve you doing something. It's amazing when you can get an actor to sign up for a campaign you've worked on, and I've worked on stuff that actors have bought into. It's really helps, but oftentimes like like a famous fan, i.e. someone who's famous in the fandom, is going to be a bigger get for you than an actor who might just do one throwaway tweet. And these are really important influencers on those things. And I always come
Yeah.
back to asking your base what they're into. Sorry, go ahead, Portia.
No, I'm just thinking about the Game of Thrones issue. And I'm like, even with Game of Thrones, I think the like it's such character driven and like point of view character kind of like driven kind of attitude. So I think that even if you were going to try to do a campaign around Game of Thrones while it was so popular, it probably would make more sense to do it around like economic opportunity or something, like talking about like greed and corporatization or something, than it would like trying to drive something else.
Yeah, team small folk. So social media platforms, one of the reasons why they're a good place to look at fan activism and fandom in general is because of their being so hashtag driven. You can literally just show up in the tags and see what people are talking about. There's also so many YouTube channels, fan cams, and I also put it to other folks like, what's next? Where are you engaging? Like you, as in people who are here in this chat, like where are you guys engaging with other fans? Yeah, totally, Matt. Like the Falcon and Winter Soldier is like, there's so much material on racial justice in there, including things that, and like lots of real arguments, like, do we think the show is doing this in a fucked up way? Do we think the show is doing this in a good way? Like actually in a debate about how it's carrying the material. I mean, like people have different ways they're relating to it right now. You'll also find that like Tumblr is really a dead platform in most things, but it is not a dead platform in certain fandoms. So give that a check there too. I want to ask folks, this is a protest that we did when Trump came into power. It was with a crew of us trying to get Trump to get Bob Iger to leave the Trump's Economic Council. And so I use this example because this is not an example of fan activism. This is an example of culture jamming and brand jacking. Now, while my friend and I are here with our signs, our fans of Disney related properties, in my case specifically, like X-Men stuff, comics rather, now that the worlds have merged, we weren't there like celebrating the story. We were there co-opting their symbols to criticize the hypocrisy of the target. I love brand jacking. I love culture jacking. Groups should be doing this all the time, but it is not the same thing as fan activism because we're literally showing up in a way that's kind of mocking this, right? Even if we do love it, we're like satirizing it. And I think a lot of organizations confuse the two with each other, and they are not the same. If I wanted to organize Disney fans to tell Bob Iger to quit the council, I might do something a little bit more Jiminy Cricket rooted, actually, being like, what would Jiminy Cricket do when he's asking for things to be better, when he's asking for what the dreams are, like to make it an ask for a better change versus satire, which is very much like a fuck you, right? Both of these things are good, but they're not the same.
And neither of them are fan activism.
Yeah. I mean, that would have to be fans, right? Like it's not fan activism if it's not fans doing it.
Yeah, there's not like love there. I think, and that's another part of like the Opportunity Agenda's like platform as well, is telling a story that is like values driven and about like the heart and not about like, again, we have a thing called BPSA, values, problem, solutions, and action. There's a reason why solutions and actions come after the problem, because if you stick in the problem, people get worked up, but they don't know what to do next. So give them a solution.
So again, just to be clear, like we love brand jacking. This is not a critique of this.
No.
This was a great action and it went really viral, but like it's not the same thing as what we're talking about.
When you're building a narrative, again, cannot over emphasize, go with the fans. Where are the fans? Where are the fans in your org? How can they help you design what would be something useful to use? what are the studies that have come out about what fans are into, how they lean, what they think politically. The Harry Potter Alliance just did a report with a narrative research group, and they I think it's Harmony Labs, and they looked at where different fandoms are on the political spectrum. That might be an interesting report to be looking into. There's just different ways to engage with where fans are across the different issue areas, right? Set the scene, make sure that, again, going back to grounding it and the storytelling and aligning them with real world issues, draw that connection. And then make sure you're on making a value statement about the things that you're using to make these guided communications campaign strategies. And going back to the VPSA, make sure there's a call to action. We can talk about solutions and we can talk about issues all we want, but if there, no one has a clear call to action, is it calling representative? Is it writing in a letter campaign? Is it marching on Times Square at noon? Like, we need to know what the call to action is.
And I really want to see more groups using this for corporate pressure campaigns, because fan activism and corporate pressure, I think, work really well together, because it doesn't matter what district, you know, like Mitch McConnell doesn't give a fuck what I do. I'm a New Yorker, but all the corporations that fund him do, because I'm a consumer, right? And the brands are very aware of how they're being used and can use their powers for good, or they can use their powers for evil. I would love to see folks, sorry.
No, this is not a fan thing, but we're seeing that right now directly with voting rights in Georgia and Black Voters Matter calling on Coca-Cola and Delta and all these companies. I love that one of the CEOs had to backtrack whenever, one of the CEOs had to backtrack because he initially had gone in favor of it and then got called out and backtracked. And now Mitch McConnell is saying that corporations shouldn't be talking about these things, but yet corporations are people, so the Citizens Unite. So here we are.
Yeah, I want to respond to a question somebody posted, which was, are there any recommendations for single payer people? So I think you want to start from the beginning, which is, who are the people that you're trying to organize for single payer? And like, are these people that are in a community that you're in? Are you looking for, because there's a ton of people who want single payer, like, are you looking for mobilizing people who already support single payer to do a specific thing? Or are you looking to use a pop culture campaign within an existing organization that fights for single payer? But you have to go with who they are, what they watch, what they love, and start from that point and find out what the fandoms are. So young people support single payer, right? Like they do, like the math supports that. So I think a lot of the times when I've seen young people talking on social media about how they support single payer, and they might not necessarily use the term single payer. They might say, we all need healthcare for everyone, or Medicare for all, like that stuff. So like look and find them. And what they often are lacking in that is it's a direct ask of what to do. So if you as an organization are able to give them an ask and be there with them and be like, hell yes, and say, here's a thing you can do to fight for this, then you're doing something to engage with them and support them. But you want to also look for, what are the stories that the young people that you want to reach, what are they engaging with? And like, listen to them about like, what are the themes that deal with healthcare? This is like a long time back, but and not specific to young people, but I think about Breaking Bad, and the whole line of Breaking Bad is, if he had had healthcare, he wouldn't have had to become a gangster who like shoots people and sells drugs. Like there's like these stories about healthcare access are in so many pieces of pop culture. So like find it, but start with who you want to move. Sorry, Portia, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and then I mean, if you know of fandoms that like they have utopian worlds where they do like have, like, it doesn't have to be utopian, it could be just like socially aware, right? But they have those built-in infrastructural things for the people in those cultures. I'm thinking about, this is my, again, very limited fandoms that I'm in, Pokemon. You can go to a Poke Center and heal your Pokemon immediately. If you faint, you wake up in a bed and you're taken care of. There's so many different like places where you might be able to find some like adjustment for talking about like everyone having equal access to healthcare.
And Star Trek, right? Like Star Trek is all about future utopia of plenty. And the fandom has been, recently more reactivated because of the new shows. So post-scarcity economics is definitely a theme in there. I wanted folks to sort of take some time to think about, what do you know is coming up? Like what movies, I mean, COVID sort of threw the movie schedule release stuff off for a loop, and it was sort of like, but like we know some stuff that's coming. We also know that there's certain things that come every year. The Oscars come every year. You know, people all watch, what's that? They watch the same movies for Xmas every year. Like, what do you know that's coming up? Black Widow will at some point be out. Yes, exactly. You know, what are the themes that it's likely to have? And sometimes it doesn't live up to what you want it to do, right? Like I was really hoping there'd be some meteor like climate change stuff we could do around Aquaman. And Aquaman, not only did it not deliver, but the environmentalist was the bad guy. Good job. But you have to be ready to be able to jump on that. So what, you know, like follow what is coming up and think about what themes you think might end up in them. And if it ends up there, then you're ready to go. And if it isn't, maybe there's a way you can sort of pivot to think about it. Matt mentioned, yeah, all the new Star Wars shows coming up. Like, what is the story that we think they're likely to tell? You know, at some point in time, there's going to be an X-Men show, an X-Men movie coming out, and that's literally about marginalized people organizing against oppressors. The disability community has done a lot of work specifically talking about the mutant metaphor and disability. You know, historically, queer community has done that a lot as well. Like, get ready for when those things happen. And it doesn't even have to be the biggest property. Like, I think about something like really popular podcasts, you know, what are the stories in those? What else is on people's radar? What else is coming up?
I'm thinking throughout like the Star Wars, like that's just, there's so many different Star Wars things coming out, right? Like not only are we getting another Mandalorian season, but that Mandalorian season, we're also getting the what is his name? Oh my gosh, this is what I get for not being a Star Wars like super fan. The actual Mandalorian that everyone, oh, Boba Fett.
Like Boba Fett is going to be in it. Yeah.
He's gonna have his own spin-off series. And initially, we were all
Jesus.
thinking it's gonna be like the Mandalorian, but he was gonna lead this. No, he's getting his own spin-off series, and we're also getting the Mandalorian, and then we're also getting Ahsoka. So we're just in that universe alone getting 3 shows. And what do you think those characters are likely to embody and go through in those stories? I'm loving seeing like yeah, we know we're getting Black Widow, but I love seeing like Thor Love and Thunder, like yes, especially like the like representation of queer people with Thor Love and Thunder, because we're getting Tessa Thompson again, and I love Valkyrie and I will ride for her, and I would love to see what happens next with that.
Yeah, and she's an actor who will push the limits of like what Marvel will let her get away with saying, like as a queer person, you know. Tessa Thompson is indeed amazing. Also, yes, Monica Rambeau and Captain Marvel too. You know, I definitely feel like because of who we are, we sort of are leaning towards a lot of the sort of superhero and science fiction related. Like, I literally have a comics podcast. I get it, but I do want to encourage people to also think about like things beyond that, and to think about like I was giving the example of like from an ABC TV show or whatever network Parks and Rec was on.
There's a new show coming out of that's going to be native led, like, and developed. I don't remember the name of it.
It's like, yeah, I heard about it. They like freaking finally cast native voice actors. It takes place.
They have native writers who are writing it. Yeah. It's like oh my gosh, I'm so like this is a live action. This is like from the same like Mike Schurverse.
I'm thinking of a different show. Sorry.
Yeah,
that means there's a cartoon as well. Hooray!
Yay! But there's oh my gosh, it's going to be so annoying to. I think it's another single word, like not like Parks and like it's not Parks and Rec. It's like another word. Goodness, it's going to bother me. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Somebody mentioned music fandoms. It's really interesting because like we were very, very tired of there being like so many terrible like right-wing bands trying to claim the metal space. Kim Kelly, who you all probably know from Labor Twitter, organized an anti-fascist metal festival. So like, you know, in a lot of spaces, like this is one of the things I think the left needs to realize is that the right wing has been organizing in fan communities for years. They absolutely like, Ms. Marvel's Pakistani American. They absolutely like they've used and weaponized the Star Wars fandom to do right wing crazy bullshit. And in those same spaces, folks like Portia and I have been like, hey guys, we should pay attention to this, and not getting any funding to be able to do that work. So while we were away, they're like overtaking these spaces. And so to think about like, you know, I think that we watch Star Trek and Star Wars and we're like, how the hell could you get conservative like viewpoints from these? But they're coming into these stories with these warped worldviews, and they're telling themselves the stories that they want to see from it. We have to contest that territory. Yeah, totally. Oh my God, let's talk about the Punisher logo and the pigs. Like, oh boy.
Woo.
And so to think, and so sorry, bringing that back to music though, is like you'll find some fandoms are very split. You've got your real hardcore right-wing scary people, and you've got progressives. And if we can help create space for the progressives who love those things to find each other more easily, then I think that would be quite lovely.
Yeah, I just like, I think one thing I want to say about, and I do want to study more about fandom and fan culture and driving a lot of this activism, has been, and this is again not music fandom related, but I think there are a lot of things that are going on in music and entertainment that like align with like the Me Too movement and a lot of activism going on there. So I think that just how pop culture works in general, like if you have people who are actively engaging in some form of fan culture, they're likely also highly organized around a social issue aligned with that fan culture.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important thought. Swifties 4 is a powerful youth vote force, brings up April. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, we've seen certainly like interesting fan organizing happening online with young women in particular, for voter stuff. Man, we had a whole presentation about like having to look more critically at the K-pop
Yeah,
fandom work
I think the
that we did
K-pop
at
fans
HPA.
they did that very what did you call that term for smashing?
They like jammed the signal. I mean,
Yeah, they're really great jammers. Like I've never heard of anyone being so good, well organized around just like digital jamming as K-pop fans.
well, I would say, Jason, I mean, the hardcore, the 80s hardcore bands you're referring to are radical, but their active fandoms are like, how active are the fandoms is the thing. I mean, people still listen, but there's no shows to go to of them. So right, like they're not generally touring right now. So like you want to look at what are the equivalents for those bands now that we can like support and engage with. And I'm also like, I'm not going to show up at like a crust punk show and be like, vote for Democrats. Like that's not the connecting analysis. But like I could show up in that space and talk about like climate change, and I can talk about things that are not at odds with the way they view themselves. But yeah, like I mean, music communities we're rooted in political movement like from the start. I periodically show up on Twitter to yell at people who don't understand that ska was a political movement and is not about white boys in Boston, and actually is about Black freedom. But anyway,
I just want to jump in because it's at the hour, and so we're going to need to turn over the room, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I did also want to real quick encourage folks to find the networking space in Hopin in between sessions so you can get to know some of the other folks.
And folks can always follow me on Twitter again. I'm Ilana_Brooklyn. We're going to be doing and follow Portia, the Opportunity Agenda. Like we live and breathe this stuff. We want to keep talking with you about it.
Yeah, and I am again researcher by trade. So if y'all are interested in doing collaborating on any like research, I would love to hear out any ideas people are having.
And I'm going to be doing more trainings coming up as we do. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.